Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. Today's video is going to be all for the singles. I am going to be talking about contentment and singleness, and it's not what you think though, or at least I don't think it's what you think. I have some things to say on this topic that are probably not what you would expect as we talk about contentment, just because it's not normally what is said. But I think that it needs to be said, so I'm excited to do that. I will also be giving some practical tips. But before we get into that, if you haven't yet, please be sure to hit that subscribe button. I do all sorts of faith and lifestyle content. I'm also planning to start doing some more vlog style videos going forward, and so that is coming. But really for the month of February, I have a lot of content planned that is geared toward singleness, dating, relationships, and just speaking into those topics. But really speaking encouragement specifically into the area of singleness. I myself am single. I've written a devotional for singles. I will link that below if you want to check it out. But I feel like I really just have a heart to speak into this topic because I know that it can be discouraging at times, and I know that when you're feeling that discouragement and when you're in the middle of it, you really just long and desire and want something to speak into what you're feeling, to speak into those longings. And so I really hope that this video can be that for you, and that this sort of series, not a series, but the videos I'm going to be doing this month, I hope that they can speak into that. And I would just ask also, if you have any single friends or people you know are just having a hard time in this area, having a hard time waiting on God, that you would send them this video first and foremost to encourage them. I really truly hope that it helps, and then also that's a huge way you can support my channel. So thank you for being here. I'm excited to have you here, and we will jump in. Also, I'm getting over being sick, so if I sound like that, then that is why. The first thing I want to say that you might not expect is that contentment does not mean that it is bad to desire marriage. It is not wrong to desire marriage. Yes, contentment is a beautiful thing. Contentment is a biblical thing, even more importantly. But I think sometimes in the way that we talk about contentment, we can start to develop a wrong understanding of what it actually means. We say things like, it'll happen when you least expect it, or don't focus too much on it, or don't long for it because that's not where God has you right now. Just be happy where He has you. And we can start to believe that to be content means that we don't desire something, or that desiring something is bad. And I just don't think that is true. I could try to sort of put words to this to explain what I'm saying, but I'm going to start by reading a quote that when I came across it for the first time, was just like, praise. It is by Matt Chandler. If you don't know who Matt Chandler is, he is a pastor in Texas. I love listening to his sermons. He's very biblically grounded and rooted, and so here's what he has to say on this. He says, "Something has happened in the church where if you are a single woman, you are taught that you aren't supposed to desire marriage and to be content in that spot of singleness, and that is somehow more glorifying than following God's wiring of you to want a mate. We start to walk around as liars because we have been told as soon as you're content, God will bring your husband. So now we walk around saying, I'm content. Now where is he? No, it is okay to desire that for which you are created. God created us with a desire to be in relationship. He created us with a need to be connected to other human beings. And so this comes through many different forms, obviously family, friendships, romantic relationships, and above all else, God created us for relationship with Him, but He also created us to need connection with other humans. In Genesis, God says to Adam that it is not good for man to be alone. And then He proceeds to create for him Eve, his wife. And it's so important to note that this is said pre-fall. This is said before sin enters into the world and distorts everything and fractures our relationship with God. This is said when Adam himself is living in a state of perfect unity, perfect communion, perfect relationship with God. Yet even in that state, God says it is not good for you to be alone because you still need connection with other human beings. And so it is not wrong to desire marriage. God created us with that desire to want to be in relationship. And so to those people who say that you just need to be completely satisfied in Jesus and not want anything else or not have a need for anything else, well, that's just not true of how God created us. God created us with physical needs for food. He created us with relational needs for relationship in our lives. Yes, we should be fully satisfied in Jesus in the sense that we derive our full significance, our identity, our purpose from Him. That cannot come from a human being, but He did also create us with the need for connection with other human beings. And so it is not wrong to desire marriage. You should not feel guilty about having that desire. Now, does that mean that you're going to get married exactly on the timeline that you always imagined you would? No. Does that even mean that you are necessarily going to get married at all? No. The Bible does not promise marriage to us. However, statistically, most people do get married, and the Bible does teach us that as we are walking with Him, that as we are in relationship with God, that over time He is continually molding and changing our desires to align with His desires for us. And so I would even make the argument that if you have a desire for marriage and it has not wavered as, keyword as, you have continually pursued God faithfully with everything above all else, and as you have been obedient to what He has asked you to do, and that desire has not changed, I would say that that is likely an indication that God intends to fulfill that desire at some point. But obviously I can't tell you when. And so the first thing I want to say is that it is not bad to desire marriage. This is not something that you should feel guilty about. Yes, that desire needs to be submitted to Him, and yes, we need to trust Him with that desire, but the desire in and of itself is not wrong. For me, there have been times in my life where my desire for marriage has felt more consuming and it's weighed on me and it's made me sad. And then there's been other times where my life has just felt really full of good things and I've been more satisfied in that and more at peace and content, and also trusting of God's timing for that desire. And I mentioned this in a video recently, but that's sort of where I've been at recently. And that peace, that sense of trust, that contentment, that is a gift. But also the way that God has met me in those other times when I have felt more of that hurting and that yearning and that longing and that wanting, that has also been a gift. I was actually just talking to some friends at Bible study saying that in a way I sort of miss those times, not because I miss feeling that sadness, but because I miss the closeness to God I felt in that sadness. Psalm 34:18 says that God is close to the brokenhearted, and it is so true. I think that there is a certain intimacy we experience with God in those times of sadness or in those times where we're just going through hard things that is different than what we experience when it sort of just feels like everything is okay. And so I sort of just want to redefine the way that we think about contentment and make it very clear that contentment is not sort of manipulating our emotions to pretend that we're somewhere we're not, but rather contentment biblically is accepting where it is that God has you, wherever that may be, and striving to see the gift in that. If you are at a place where you feel more at peace, great. That is a gift to thank God for. But also if you are in a place where you are feeling more of that longing and that wanting and that yearning and that hurting, don't try to pretend that those emotions aren't there because you feel like you're not supposed to be sad. Instead, let those longings lead you into deeper intimacy with God, because that intimacy with Him is also a gift to be treasured. I don't think this means we're supposed to wallow in our feelings. I think that ultimately we do need to trust where God has us, but that does not mean pretending that you don't feel the things that you do. And I also just want to say too that contentment is not something that we arrive at. For me, even being in more of this place of peace, that is not to say that I don't have days where I'm sad about it and where I long for that. In fact, I just had one of those days like 3 weeks ago, and that is okay. Contentment is not some destination that we arrive at. I think that contentment is something that ebbs and it flows, and it's something that we can move toward and choose and take steps towards daily. And so with that being said, I want to just share some practical things that have helped me when I have been feeling that way to take steps towards and to move toward contentment. My first tip on how to be content in singleness is to take away the number. You know which one I'm talking about. I think we all have a timeline of when we thought we were going to get married, or when we were going to start having kids, or when we hope to do those things, and that may or may not happen for you, or that may or may not have already happened for you. I have a best friend who used to live about 2 hours north of me, and I would try to visit her fairly often. And I remember so specifically this one Friday night I went to go visit her after work, and the direction I was going was just horrible commute traffic, especially on a Friday afternoon, and it was just bad. I think I had punched in her address, and when I first left my work, it was like 7 p.m. was my ETA when I was supposed to get there, and then I was just sitting in traffic and it wasn't moving, and I kept looking down on it and it was saying like 7 and then 7:15 and then 7:21 and then 7:30 and then 7:40, and I was just getting more and more stressed out because I saw that my time for the good stuff, right, my time to hang out with her and to cuddle her new baby that she had just had at the time, that time for that good stuff was dwindling, and I was thinking that I was going to get less and less of that time. And I came to a point where I realized, you know what, I don't actually need the directions to her house. I know how to get to her house. All this is doing is stressing me out as I am staring down at this ETA and how it is changing. And so I decided that I just need to turn off this ETA, and then it allowed me to actually enjoy the ride. And I listened to music, I put on a podcast, and I was able to enjoy the drive. I know that sounds super cheesy, and that taking away the number is nowhere near as easy as turning off a GPS system on our phone. I completely get that. But something that I like to do that has really and truly helped me is sort of looking at the timeline I have for myself, or looking at that age that I want things to happen by, and just asking myself, like, what would be so bad if it was a couple years after that, or even longer maybe. And really, I think asking myself why that number is there in the first place. Is it because I want to be perceived a certain way? Is it because I'm worried that if this doesn't happen, then this won't happen? Like, what is so important about that number in the first place? And so I would just say that if you can do that, if you can try to remove the pressure of it having to be on a certain timeline, or really just understanding why that's so important to you in the first place, that can really help to alleviate a lot of the anxiety. Number 2 is to take a realistic look ahead. I think that when you are single, it is really easy to romanticize that next season and to just see only the good things in it and to long for that. I think that this is something that I used to do, especially more so when I was younger and growing up, and I'm so thankful that in the last several years I've gotten to see a lot of my close friends get married. I've gotten to spend time around them and their marriages and around older couples who are married, and I've just gotten to get a little bit more of a realistic look at it, that yes, there are so many good and beautiful things about marriage that I am excited for when that day comes, but there are also things that are difficult, and there are sacrifices you make, and there are certain freedoms you have when you're single that you don't have in the same way when you are married. I have had multiple close friends of mine who got married when they were fairly young say to me, Casey, you know, I look at your life and I see that you've gotten this time to really learn who you are, to learn who God created you to be, to learn what passions and what purposes that He has for your life, and to step into those things. You've gotten time to travel and to do all those things, and you know, I didn't necessarily get that time, and they say this to me to sort of remind me to be thankful for that and to see the gift in that, because there truly is a gift in that. And so the second point is really just to say that, you know, don't look at only the bad in your season and then only look at the good in the season ahead, because the reality is that both seasons, that all seasons have both good and both bad, and really all we can do is to be thankful for and to appreciate and to enjoy the good in the season that we're in. Number 3 is to take control of what you can. I think that sometimes a lot of the frustration in singleness comes from this feeling of helplessness, of feeling like we have these desires for our lives and we're sort of being held back from being able to get a start on those things because we're not married yet. And the reality is that is just not true. Yes, there are some things that we can't exactly do until marriage, but there are a lot of things I think we think can't happen until marriage, but they're really changes that we could be making now. You know, if you've always imagined that you want to travel one day when you get married, or that you want to be better about saving money, or that you want to eat healthier, or I don't know, just things that you think can't happen till marriage, if you want to have your own place, take the steps that you can towards making those changes now. Some of my favorite memories have been from these trips I've taken with friends of mine, and almost all of those trips have been with friends that are also single because they had the time and the space to do that. If you long to have your own place when you get married, take steps towards maybe being able to do that in whatever way you can now, in an apartment or whatever. I think that sometimes we are longing for this big external change when really maybe there are some changes that need to happen internally that aren't going to solve everything, because yes, that desire is still valid, but that are going to help us in that sense of feeling like things are progressing and moving forward and that we're growing and changing in our lives. And so I would just say to take control of what you can, because yes, this one specific thing of this desire for marriage may be something that you cannot control right now, but there are a lot of other things in your life that you can control that are going to get you closer to being the person that you want to be. And so I think that in doing that and taking control of the things that we can, we move from this feeling of being helpless to feeling empowered. Fourth and final and most important is to take it to God. This is what I was talking about before. Take your longings to God. Go before Him with the things that you're feeling. Press into His heart. Build a relationship with Him in those emotions that you're feeling. There's a quote I love by Tim Keller that says that God will either give us what we ask for, or He will give us what we would have asked for if we knew everything that He knows. I think that hindsight has a funny way of showing us more of God's heart, showing us why things needed to happen when they needed to happen. I know for me, there have been so many times when I have looked back in hindsight and been so thankful that God didn't answer specific prayers, either prayers to end up with a specific guy, and I see now why that wasn't what God had for me, and I thank Him for that, or even prayers of things happening when I wanted them to happen. I always thought that I would be married by 21, and looking back now, I'm so thankful that that didn't happen. Not because that's bad in any way. I know plenty of people who got married at that age or even younger and have beautiful marriages, but because that's not what would have been best for me. And I see that now. I can see that more in hindsight. And so even if I can't see or understand right now why what God is doing or not doing why it makes sense or why he's doing it. I can trust that as time passes and as I look back on it, I'm going to be able to see with more clarity his hand and what he was doing and why he was doing it. But in the meantime, I need to trust his heart, and the way I come to trust his heart is by knowing him and by growing in relationship with him, because in that I see that his heart towards me is good, that he is good, and that his plans for me are good. Those are my 4 tips. I hope that they were helpful. At the end of the day, we can't control the timing of the seasons of life that we're in, but we can control who we allow those seasons to turn us into. And I think that it is specifically our approach to the seasons that we don't want to be in that does a great deal to determine the types of people we become. Are we going to become bitter and not trust God? Or are we going to choose to continually trust him even when it doesn't make sense, even when it hurts, even when we've been waiting so long? And so I truly hope that this video was helpful to you and encouraging to you. If it was, please be sure to give it a thumbs up and leave a comment down below letting me know what from this video was most helpful to you. That will just be helpful to me as I am creating these other videos for the month of February, how I can best serve you. And so thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye.